I'm Brandi Kruse. Coming up today on Undivided, West Coast so-called leaders are inviting violence into their communities, and Washington state is next. Plus, a woman claims she was fired from the Office of Superintendent of Public Instruction because she stood up for female athletes. And the Seattle Times shames businesses who pulled out of supporting the Seattle Pride Parade. That and much more coming up today on Undivided. Remember, for 3 more days, we're running our 30% off promo. It's an effort to help reach our goal of adding 300 new paid subscribers in just 30 days. And we are, at this very moment, 58 paid subscribers away from reaching our goal. So you could be one of them, help support our work and our efforts to give common sense a comeback. Go to patreon.com/undivided. That's patreon.com/undivided. Use the promo code 300. That's the number 300. Hello and welcome to Undivided. Thank you for being here. Thank you so much for your commitment to giving common sense a comeback. I want to start the show today with a thought exercise. Let's try to think critically and put ourselves in the minds of these radical political activists who are perpetrating violence on communities, not only now over ICE immigration enforcement, but on a variety of things, whatever the flavor of the day is, whether it's, their love for Hamas or their hate for police officers, whatever it is. So what would you do? Let's be honest with ourselves. If you thought you were fighting fascists, if you really believed that you were fighting the equivalent of Hitler and the Nazis, what would you be willing to do? What do you think you would do in response to a threat to humanity that was that grave? I'd like to think that I would have killed some Nazis, frankly. I mean, if you could, literally, if you had this group of people in the SS and the Nazis and Hitler, and they were perpetrating genocide and they were murdering people in mass, millions of people, trying to cleanse the world, what would you have done? I like to think if given the opportunity, I would have been capable of killing them. At the very least, and taking to the streets and clashing with the SS or whatever it is. I mean, if you really were there in that moment, faced with such a grave threat to humanity. So when you start to think of it that way, and then you start to think of the fact that you have these left-wing rioters and Antifa, etc., who genuinely believe that. They believe they are right now in Los Angeles. They believe they're fighting a threat just as grave as Hitler and the Nazis. And yes, it's because they're misguided morons, right? But it's also because we have some of the highest elected officials in the land who are telling them to believe that, who are convincing them that their thought process, that they're basically fighting Nazis, is correct. In Washington state, our highest member of law, I call it law enforcement, but the chief law enforcer in the state of Washington is telling them that Donald Trump, that his federal immigration enforcement amounts to fascism. Here's Washington Attorney General Nick Brown in an interview with KUOW.
The Secretary of Defense, Pete Hegseth, has threatened to mobilize active duty Marines in response to the protests in Los Angeles. And this would seem to be in, violation of laws against U.S. military engaging in law enforcement on U.S. soil, the Posse Comitatus Act. Do you take that as a serious possibility from the federal government at this point from what you've seen?
Well, we certainly have to take anything that the Secretary of Defense says seriously on the one hand, because these are the people that are in control of our various government entities. But to hear that from the Secretary of Defense is pretty scary because, as you note, you can't simply do that because you want to. And I think more broadly, what we're seeing from the president is, it really does meet the definition of fascism. And I don't say such a thing lightly. I think we have to be very careful about our language. but we're seeing authoritarianism, we're seeing dictatorial behavior, we're seeing that to suppress what the president believes is the opposition, and we're seeing a disregard for the rule of law, all of which are characteristics of a fascist government. And, when the Secretary of Defense is talking about activating the U.S. military to quell some disturbance in a city involving American citizens, we have to treat that very seriously, even though it's unprecedented and I think would be illegal.
Yeah, we have to use our words carefully. But Trump is a dictator. Trump is an authoritarian. Trump is a fascist. So what the state's chief law enforcer is doing is he's justifying this violent faction of the left in their actions against fascists. Now, I think it's split. I think there are some of these left-wing nut jobs who actually do believe. Like, I've been around enough TDS and all of that. They actually do believe Trump is a fascist. And they actually do believe that there is a comparison to be made between Donald Trump and Hitler. So I do believe that faction is absolutely 100% there. But, and then I think some of them are just using, they'll protest anything. So I don't know that they really believe in their heart and soul that Donald Trump poses a threat as great as Hitler did. But for the people who want to feel justified in what they're doing, now they have our Attorney General who's helping them feel justified in it. He's inviting violence into our communities as the guy who is supposed to be, more so than anyone else, protecting our communities against criminal wrongdoing. So when you start to think of it, it's not just, and I think I need to start changing the way that I talk about these people. It's not just some fringe faction of the left. It's the Democratic establishment that is encouraging this behavior, that is condoning this behavior, that's excusing this behavior, because they use words like fascist to describe Donald Trump. And so when we have violence over this on the streets of Seattle, Nick Brown is directly to blame for it. Because he told them, you're fighting fascists, basically. Do what you need to do. Because this is an existential threat to our country. This is a dictator. This is authoritarianism. And, right as this is happening, Antifa sends out this alert. Emergency protest from LA to Seattle. ICE out. It's happening tomorrow, 7 p.m. Guess where? Cal Anderson Park. 10th and Denny, the heart of where we were 5 years ago with political violence and unrest in this city. They say the people of Los Angeles and surrounding areas have taken a courageous stand against Trump's reign of terror targeting immigrant families. In response, the administration has falsely labeled those taking to the streets in protest of the brutal war on immigrants as rioters and called in thousands of National Guard soldiers for a crackdown. But we cannot let this repression intimidate us. For those who believe in immigrant rights, for those who believe in democracy, for the entire working class, now is the time to take to the streets in protest. And this particular group, when they say protest, they mean riot. There's a reason that they're having it at night at 7 p.m. in the heart of the most riot-prone area of the city of Seattle. And it comes as the state's chief law enforcer is basically telling them, go ahead and do it. These are fascists. I just don't know what to do to wake people up and change their way of thinking this Saturday. There's another opportunity for violence to devolve. And instead of at every opportunity, anyone who's an actual leader should, without qualification, be saying that this has to stay peaceful. This has to stay peaceful. Instead, they're just adding fuel to the fire because they're making it about Donald Trump and they're blaming Donald Trump for it because he started all this by enforcing immigration laws. Immigration laws, which, by the way, are wildly popular with the American people. And that was the chief reason he was reelected. And this Saturday, all across the country, Seattle Indivisible is holding one of those No Kings. So there's this stupid No Kings mass protest all across the country. There's like 1,900 locations that are having rallies and marches. And I'm sure a lot of those will be mundane. I even heard some like Eastern Washington, tiny little towns where people are going to show up for a No Kings protest. those are probably going to be your geriatric progressives who are going to show up with one or two of their friends after having morning tea, and they're going to be just fine and protest, as is the American way, and then they're going to go home. But of course, when there's any sort of protest happening in Seattle, as this one is going to happen again, Cal Anderson Park, they're going to start at Cal Anderson Park and march to Seattle Center, to the Space Needle. Yeah, that'll go well. Again, emboldened, given permission to engage by any means necessary to topple a fascist regime by the state's chief law enforcer and by the state's governor, who has never called out. Never. Has he ever? The one time I can think of, it was when they blocked the freeway. And it was this like tepid, And he was running for governor, so Bob Ferguson felt like he had to. Left-wing violence on campus for the pro-Hamas folks, summer of 2020. He didn't say anything about the violence, looting, vandalism. And so what's going to happen? I mean, they know that they can do this. They're being told that it's okay. And they're being told that they're doing something historic by fighting against a fascist that's as bad as Adolf Hitler. So it's like, do I blame the left-wing lunatics who scurry out of their parents' basements and put on all black and go out and break things? Yes, it's their fault. They need to be held accountable. I hope the feds institute federal charges against them, because we know the states and the counties and the cities won't do a damn thing. But I blame the so-called leaders and ultimately the voters and the media. It's all this sick cycle where the media doesn't hold them accountable for saying it. So then the voters, they just blame whoever the media wants to blame, which is Orange Man bad. And then they'll vote for the Democrats because they think the Democrats are the ones protecting the democracy. So it's just a sick, sick, sick cycle. And I don't know when people will get tired of it. Meanwhile, the only ones who seem to be actually sending a message that violence is not okay, that we're not going to tolerate violence, and we're actually going to act on arrests and prosecution, seems to be President Donald Trump and his administration.
Many of those people that you saw on television last night are criminals that were allowed into our country by Biden. And they want to stay, and we don't want them. And they come from jails, and they come from mental institutions, and they come from all over the world, not just South America. And we're not going to let them stay. And this is the first, perhaps, of many, or perhaps if we didn't attack this one very strongly, you'd have them all over the country. But I can inform the rest of the country that when they do it, if they do it, they're going to be met with equal or greater force than we met right here.
Yeah. So you've got Donald Trump, who is saying, look, if you riot in anywhere in the country, city like Seattle, you riot there, you're going to be met with force. If you assault our ICE agents, you try to vandalize a federal building, you'll be met with force. So that's what Donald Trump is saying in advance of these protests that are going to happen in the next few days. Meanwhile, Democrat Attorney General Nick Brown is saying, well, they're fascists, so what are you going to do? Making them think that they're on a righteous mission. And meanwhile, the Trump administration isn't going to give in and stop enforcing immigration laws, because then they know you give in to the mob, you give a mouse a cookie. And that's not just they're not just all going to suddenly go home and, we don't have anything to protest and riot about anymore. No, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. They'll always find something. This week, it happens to be over immigration. And so the Trump administration is not going to give a mouse a cookie and reward bad behavior. They're going to continue, and ICE agents at great personal risk to themselves are going to continue going across the country into sanctuary jurisdictions like the city of Seattle, and they're going to enforce our nation's immigration laws. In fact, Tom Homan, gosh, he's a beast. He was on the news saying, if anything, we're going to double down.
We could arrest them in the safety and security of the county jail, but they won't let us into jail. They release them into the community, which means we got to send a whole bunch of teams in the community to find this dangerous person that don't want to be found. So Sanctuary City is going to get exactly what they don't want. More officers in the communities and more officers in worksite. We can't arrest them in jail or arrest them in the community. If we can't arrest them in the community, we're going to increase worksite enforcement operation. We're going to flood the zone. And based on what LA is doing right now, we're going to continue to flood the zones. We're going to be there tonight. We're going to be there tomorrow. We're going to be there every day in the next 4 years, arresting public safety threat illegal aliens. We're not going to apologize for doing it.
Yeah, they're not going to back down. They're not going to give in to the mob, as the left has done for so long, ignored the mob, gave in to the mob, gave over 6 square blocks of a city to the mob, just hoping, oh, okay, we'll hand out $1 million contracts to people based on their skin pigmentation in the hopes that they'll stop rioting and looting in our cities. Of course, they never did. They just took the money and ran. We'll side with them. We'll bribe them. We'll condone. And maybe one day they'll stop burning down our cities. Well, that's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. We've been waiting for that to happen for like 25 years. So the Trump administration is going to keep doing what it's doing, even though Democrats are saying, you doing this is leading to this, which is not Gavin Newsom. Gavin Newsom is worse than Bob Ferguson. He's worse than Bob Ferguson. More shameless. I mean, it just makes your skin crawl, some of these interviews he's been doing and fundraising off the riots. I was pulling up some of his X posts, and he's calling it Trump's chaos now. Do you have this montage? Trump's chaos. Have no doubt violent criminals who take advantage of Trump's chaos will be held accountable. We didn't have a problem until Trump got involved. Really? That tells me that you don't think that people assaulting ICE agents is a problem, because that was happening before Trump said he was going to call in National Guard. State and local leaders are standing together to clean Trump's mess up. To the bad actors fueling Trump's flames, California will hold you accountable. Foolish agitators who take advantage of Trump's chaos. This is my favorite one. Chaos is exactly what Trump wanted, and now California is left to clean up the mess. Your own mess. Your own mess. Unreal. And just watching him, he has plenty of time. He's calling in all his favorite left-wing podcasters to come in and sit down with him in the war room, the riot war room, to do interviews. Oh my gosh, made my skin crawl. This, if Donald Trump wants a scalp, just arrest me. Just arrest me. Leave these people alone, trying to act like some sacrificial lamb. So see-through, so insane. The only Democrat who appears to have a head on their shoulders continues to be Senator John Fetterman. The only one who's been unequivocal that what's happening in California is the fault of those actually perpetrating the violence and not Donald Trump. So I've got to give him credit. He sent out a post. I unapologetically stand for free speech, peaceful demonstrations, and immigration, but this is not that. This is anarchy and true chaos. My party loses the moral high ground when we refuse to condemn setting cars on fire, destroying buildings, and assaulting law enforcement. And it's not even that his party refuses to condemn it. His party refuses to acknowledge it's even happening. They want you not to believe the pictures, not to believe the videos, not to believe what you're seeing with your own eyes. The approved Democratic talking points since Saturday have gone something like this. Oh, it's peaceful. What are you talking about? It's peaceful. Okay, it's mostly peaceful. All right, it's violent, but it's Donald Trump's fault. And then for the very unhinged, yeah, but January 6th, that's my favorite. Yeah, it's violent, but what about January 6th? That was much worse. And it's almost in unison. Those have been the talking points for Democrats pushed out to Democratic members of Congress, most of whom gladly take it up and tweet it out. And look, again, I'm willing to have we can have it right now, conversation about Trump's use of the military and calling in the National Guard. First of all, as someone, I don't remember who it was now, so aptly pointed out on social media, Gavin Newsom called in the National Guard and police during COVID. He sent police to the beaches to enforce the mask mandate. So you're willing to sick police officers on people who are on the beach who aren't wearing a mask. But when Donald Trump wants to call in the National Guard to protect life and property, you all of a sudden have a problem with that. So give me a break on the National Guard thing. And National Guard and the Marines, they're not out on the streets acting as police officers. They're specifically fulfilling a mission of protecting federal property and federal immigration agents. Now, these are two different things, the National Guard versus the troops. I think there's a reason why our founding fathers put so much safeguards in place to make sure that active duty military was not used on American soil in any way against American citizens. Now, I also think there's some gray area. I think a lot of people in those crowds are not American citizens. I believe they're foreign nationals who are fomenting violence on our streets. How do you tell the difference in the moment, though? I'm not sure. So I have mixed feelings about the Marines. But I was responding to Anna Kasparian with the Young Turks, who we've had on the show, who I just think is great, who's been a little red-pilled on what's happening in California, specifically over the last 5 years. And she was saying, she doesn't really support and does believe that Trump has instigated things happening there. And the question I asked her is like, at what point would it have been acceptable to California and to Gavin Newsom and to Democrats for Donald Trump to call in help? I mean, at no point did LAPD or local police have things under control. You had a free-for-all of people throwing rocks at and assaulting immigration agents before Trump said anything about the National Guard. And LAPD was nowhere in sight. So does Donald Trump just sit back until things are horrible and people are dying? There was no response from the Trump administration that was going to please Gavin Newsom. Let's just be clear about that. There was no response from the Trump administration that would please Democrats. None. Either it would have been, he's calling him in too soon, or he's calling him in too late. He did too much, he did too little. There's no response that would have pleased them. So let's stop pretending like there is and stop giving California a free pass and California leaders a free pass for being okay with a certain level of political violence. And then they don't want to take any responsibility for it. So now it's Trump's chaos. Okay, what was it when they were rioting and protesting in favor of Hamas? Whose fault was it when they were rioting in favor of, hating the police or against the police? Who was it during the Occupy movement? I mean, this time you can blame Donald Trump if you want, but next time when it happens again in a couple weeks or a few months and it has nothing at all to do with President Trump, who are you going to blame then? This is just what you've allowed for. And I don't know, do we have any looting video? The looting. Absolutely insane. It's all right if you don't. And then, of course, you've got the looters. Oh, yes. Nothing says, we hate ICE, like looting an Apple store. And again, that's not new either. That happens every single time there's any sort of riot or chaos in these West Coast cities and in these Democrat-run states. Absolutely unreal. All right, coming up next, we're going to talk, we'll switch gears a little bit, although we are going to circle back to this issue coming up at the end of the show. We've got a lot of good stuff on the show today. So Washington State says it's like a climate-friendly place. We had the climate governor, Governor Jay Inslee, but by now that his policies were absolute nonsense. They just cost us a lot of money and didn't do anything. Well, now a court has literally ruled that we don't, as citizens, have a right to know whether the state's climate policies are working. Yeah, that's true. We'll talk about it coming up next. First, all of us need insurance. Insurance is just part of life. The question is, do you have the right insurance? We can't, it's not something you can cheap out on. You've worked so hard for everything that you have. So you need to make sure that it's properly protected. So the next question is, do you know what that looks like? Do you know what that means? I mean, insurance is confusing. There's so much out there. And when you reach out to an insurance company, you're going to be offered a ton of things. So having an expert on your side to tell you, here's what you need, here's how much of it you need, here's what you don't need, and here's what you should be paying. I mean, to me, First Mark is one of the best calls I've ever made for my family and for my business. Our friend Brock Heward, former UW quarterback and sports radio host, agrees.
The word that comes to my mind is a word I use a lot on my sports show, and that is connective tissue. It's important in team building. It's important as players in a locker room to be connected to others. And when it comes to insurance, it's so complicated. It's so stressful. You just don't even want to deal with it. And that is where the connective tissue of having a pro, having a broker, having a partner, and most of all, having a teammate like First Mark Insurance, it was the best connective tissue we could find.
Yeah, so firstmarkinsurance.com, firstmarkinsurance.com. Set up some time to take the First Mark Challenge. It's really simple. You go over your current insurance, talk about your insurance needs. They go out, they shop the market for you. It's all totally free. You never pay First Mark anything, and they come back with their recommendation. So you really lose nothing. Either you leave just better informed or you leave saving a bunch of money. We have viewers who have saved up to $7,000 a year just by making that call to First Mark. So firstmarkinsurance.com, firstmarkinsurance.com. The very best part is they work for you. All right, nothing pisses me off quite like this. So look, if people want to vote based on climate policy, like if that's your issue, I think it's a little weird, but that's okay. If that's your whole thing, climate policy, and I'm going to vote for people who really care about our environment and want to save the planet, by all means, you do you. It's your vote, vote the way you want. What really saddens me, though, is when people vote for politicians based off climate policy that's just a grift. That's just a grift. And so they think that they're supporting someone who actually cares genuinely about helping the environment. But in so many of these instances, the policies are costing people a lot of money and they're not producing any measurable results. I mean, we have Jay Inslee, and he set all these goals, and the goals are not even feasible, and then he gets to leave office, and he'll probably in 20 years, I mean, I don't mean to be harsh, but I mean, he's kind of old. So by the time people realize that his goals aren't going to actually be feasible and come to fruition, he'll no longer be around to face any of the consequences for that and any of the hard questions about it. And then you have, of course, the Climate Commitment Act. The Climate Commitment Act is costing you, me, working class people thousands of dollars a year. And it's only going to get worse, because what does the Climate Commitment Act do? Well, it charges polluters in the form of auctions and energy credits, and then they pass that cost along to you at the gas pump, therefore at the grocery store, and also on your energy bill. But we were told, like, this is a make or break, this is such an important policy, this is going to save the planet. And then only to come to find out that 11% of CCA funds, only 11% are being used for things that actually have a tangible impact on carbon emissions. The rest of it's going to like DEI stuff and just utter nonsense. So it's like, what are we paying for here? So our friend Todd Myers, who literally wrote a book about Washington State's horrible climate policy, Time to Think Small, you should check it out. He sued the state of Washington and the Department of Ecology, because the Department of Ecology is mandated by law to release information about Washington State's carbon emissions, so people who care about the environment can track it. Hey, we're doing all this expensive, what we're supposed to believe is really great stuff for the environment, so we want to see the fruits of that labor, right? So let's see how our carbon emissions are doing year over year. The only problem is, about 3 years ago or so, the Department of Ecology just stopped releasing that data. Gee, I wonder why. I wonder why they stopped releasing that data. And they're just failing to produce it in a timely manner. So Todd Myers, who's with the Washington Policy Center, specializes in climate issues, he sued the Department of Ecology over it. And he just lost in court. And the reason why is insane. So this judge in Thurston County has decided that Todd Myers, who sued as a citizen, doesn't have standing to force the Department of Ecology to release what it is supposed to be releasing under law. And to that, my question is, well, if a citizen of the state of Washington doesn't have standing to sue over that, then who does? So basically, we're being told that Washington's climate policy is great, trust us. It's going to cost you thousands of dollars a year, but, trust us. And when we come and look for the receipts, they're saying, you don't get any receipts, and you can't even take us to court to get those receipts because the receipts don't exist. So we had Todd Myers on the show today to discuss the outcome of this lawsuit and where it goes from here. Todd Myers, welcome back to Undivided.
Thank you for having me. It's good to see you.
Yeah, so let's start with the lawsuit. So we've had you on a few times to talk about this. Is it done? Have you lost for good? Is there appeal?
Yeah, so we sued the Department of Ecology and Department of Commerce because they are required to produce CO2 emissions data. The nominal argument is like, if you don't have data, you don't know how you're doing, so we have to update the data. And the Department of Ecology is 2 years behind. With the latest data we have is from 2021, 4 years ago. So how are we doing today? Nobody knows. So they clearly are violating the law. So we argued that they should just, do what the law says. They argued, one, that they're incapable of doing it because they don't have the data, and two, that the public doesn't have standing to hold them accountable even though they're breaking the law. They admitted that they're breaking the law. They just said, we can't hold them accountable for that. Unfortunately, the judge in Thurston County agreed with them that the public doesn't have standing to make them follow the law, which we thought is sort of ridiculous, given the fact that we are constantly told that this is an existential crisis and people are being harmed and everything else. And yet those same people, when they ask, okay, how are you doing? It's like, no, you don't get to know. So we have options. We can appeal. We can ask the court to reconsider. So there's a number of different things that we're looking at. We haven't made a decision yet.
I guess I'm confused then. If the public doesn't have standing, who would have standing?
Well, it's unclear. What the judge seemed to indicate was that only the governor and legislature could ask. Now, it's sort of ridiculous for the governor to ask his own agency to provide the data. He could do that at any time, and obviously he's not. And the legislature, they don't seem to care. So if they're the only ones who could do it and the public is set aside, I think it shows you what the state thinks about who's in charge and who gets to just go along for the ride and pay the bills. And so that I think is pretty frustrating. And I think it's emblematic of our environmental policy generally, which is the state says only we can do it, and public, you just pay the bills and be quiet.
So this would, in theory, prevent us from knowing what impact the Climate Commitment Act is having, would it not?
Absolutely. So we have been, we're in our third year of the Climate Commitment Act. We're about to find out Wednesday the latest price of the taxes, and so how much it will cost in gas and everything else. And yet here we are, 2.5 years in. We have no idea whether it's working, no idea whether emissions have gone up or down. There are some preliminary data from 2003, which is the first year of the Climate Commitment Act, that
2023.
indicate that CO2 emissions actually went up. Just preliminary data from 2023. So like if those data showed that emissions went up despite the Climate Commitment Act, then I think you really have to ask, like, what are we spending this money for, and is this policy working? But fundamentally, we don't have an answer to that question. We just keep paying the taxes.
I mean, it's insane. I mean, you have this thing, hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars, people paying for it at the gas pump, energy prices, cost of food, and they act like it's the most important thing in the world. The earth would literally end if voters repealed it. But it's also like, but we're not going to tell you if it's working or not. It's crazy. I just don't even know how they can get away with it. I guess one party rule, is that the answer to how they can get away with it?
Yeah, I think if you asked people on the street, how are we doing on climate change? I think people would go, oh, I think we're doing pretty good. I just think people don't realize sort of how badly our policy is failing. And so we have to just keep getting the word out. Any 12-step recovery program, step one is admit you have a problem. And we can't admit that our climate policy is failing, even though the numbers show that every year. It's so funny. I mean, Jay Inslee, spent 12 years saying he was the climate governor. By his own data, CO2 emissions went up every single year he was governor, except one, and that was because of COVID. It's just a complete failure.
Yeah, and call me a skeptic, but I tend to think that if the numbers were really good, and that these things were having a really profoundly positive impact on the environment, we'd have those data sets real quick.
Yeah, and what you get is that they'll like choose individual projects. Oh, look how great this project is. Oh, look how great this project is. I get questions all the time from the media and the public. What do you think about this project? This sounds pretty good. And I'm like, okay, well, like, is it effective? What is it doing? And they're like, well, we haven't measured that yet. But look, I mean, this sounds really good. And that's like, I get that again and again. And then a year later, I look at, okay, what did it cost and what did it produce? And the numbers are horrible. So, but that's kind of the treadmill that we're on. As long as it sounds good, just keep doing it.
Yeah, really quickly, while they're, fumbling on that, they do have something very important they're working on. I mean, we're talking groundbreaking stuff. Our state really is, in some aspects, at the forefront of saving this planet of ours. The
Yeah.
idea is that we should stop using reusable cups and bring our own to the coffee stand, right?
It's a remarkable
Wow.
breakthrough
Wow.
to tell coffee companies that they should sell and give away reusable cups. Apparently, they've never heard of Red Cup Day. There is literally like a national day where Starbucks gives away red plastic cups for people to reuse, and then gives them a discount every time they bring it back in. People have been selling reusable cups for years. But the state literally has a program. Originally, it was supposed to be $840,000 to run a program to tell people that they should reuse their cups at coffee companies. It got cut to $400,000, which is still a ridiculous waste of money to tell people to do something that coffee companies have been telling them to do for more than a decade, 2 decades. The first, sort of red Christmas cup was in 1997, and then Starbucks started selling reusable cups and giving a reward around that time after that. We've been doing this forever. It is just an incredible waste of money for no environmental benefit. They say, well, we use too many paper cups. Paper cups are about the least important environmental concern. They're not toxic. They biodegrade. And the amount that they take up in landfills is absolutely tiny. There's so many other things that we could do with that money that would make a difference. And the notion that the state's spending money to tell people what everybody in Washington state knows already is just absurd and ridiculous.
I'm not even an environmentalist per se, and I have reusable cups. You know, I've got one in my car right now. I was using a reusable cup on my drive-in. I mean, again, so is this an active ad campaign? Is it something we're going to see TV commercials for, or what?
So that's the way I found out about it is that I heard an ad for it. And so I said, well, I'll send a disclosure request to see how much this is. Because the budget got cut in half, the program is still going until the end of the month. But after that, I think it's been canceled. I asked them, like, how many people have, signed this pledge to bring your own coffee cup? And it's 3,200 people. So, like, even if every one of those 3,200 people stopped using, a paper cup a day for a year, that's like 35 cents a cup. That's ridiculous amount of money to spend for no environmental benefit. The cups themselves don't cost anywhere near that. It's a huge waste of money no matter how you measure it.
Yeah, it's amazing how we find out about these things. Just on the show yesterday, I was sitting on my couch and this ad pops on basically encouraging fentanyl use from the Department of Health. And it took me down this whole rabbit hole of this insane campaign they wasted their money on, basically to encourage people, keep using fentanyl, just do it with a friend. And I'm just like, let's try to get people into treatment. But Todd, good stuff, terrible stuff as always, horrible, awful stuff as always. But we appreciate you.
Thank you very much. We got to keep fighting because, I think one key thing is the public just doesn't realize how wasteful some of these things are. So don't lose a faith.
Yeah, and also if you do care about the environment, genuinely that's an important issue for you in the climate, then shouldn't you be demanding that our government is spending your money on things that are actually working? I've never understood that. Oh no, let them just squander it and we'll just keep giving it and they don't actually help the environment. It's very weird that you have so many, sort of climate obsessed progressives who are the first ones to look the other way and to just, I didn't see anything here, and act like they're actually doing something important for the environment. It's wild stuff. All right, we got quite a doozy of an unbelievable story that's making the rounds all over the place out of Pasco, Washington. First, the housing market right now is ticking back up, but it's certainly different than it was a couple years ago in Washington state, where you could just throw your home on the market, get a bunch of money for it, not have to put in a lot of effort. Buyers are still looking for homes that are properly prepared for sale and obviously priced correctly, which is strategic. Our friend Wes Jones at sellwithwes.com has been through all sorts of different seasons in the market, so to speak. And so he's got a good handle on what's going on. He's going to give you some great, honest advice. If you go to sell your home, first, he'll start with a free market analysis, tell you how much your home is worth, how homes in the area are performing, sort of set your expectations. Then you'll work together on a strategy. It might include some cosmetic upgrades to your home just to make it really stand out. He'll talk to you about his strategy around pricing, etc. And the one thing I keep hearing about Wes is that his communication is top notch. So you're never going to feel like you're left in the dark, and you're going to be a teammate of his every step of the way to get the most possible value out of your home, which is what everyone wants. Sellwithwes.com, sellwithwes.com. It simply is a better way to sell your home. All right. A Pasco High School graduate is in big trouble for telling the presenter that they should have started the ceremony by speaking English. Let's talk about it in our segment, Unbelievable. Boop. All right, so this is crazy. And look, I'm not fully on this kid's side. I'm not in support of acting out during graduation ceremonies. But what I'm going to do is compare the response to this student acting out to a lack of response when people act out in a left-wing way at graduation ceremonies. So this from the Tri-City Herald. Pasco graduation disrupted by student yelling, "Should have started with English." Okay, so the backstory here. A Pasco High School graduate and his family will be meeting with administrators this week after he disrupted the school's commencement ceremony with comments that criticized the principal's use of Spanish. As Bulldogs from the class of 2025 were handed their diplomas Saturday at Edgar Brown Memorial Stadium, one student spoke into a microphone saying, "This is America. You should have started with English." His comments appeared to be in reference to Principal Veronica Machado's welcome speech, which was given first in Spanish and then in English. Okay. So can we play the video quick? We have the video. We had to find it because the schools scrubbed the graduation video. Maybe because they're embarrassed that their opening remarks were in Spanish and not English. But here's what this kid did.
Michael Isaac Paris.
This is America. Should have started with English.
Mariah Camille Guzman.
Oh my gosh. Okay. So I don't support that. Graduation, I hate these people in a variety of ways who make graduation ceremonies about themselves and draw attention to themselves. But inarguably, he's correct. I mean, Pasco, if you're not familiar, it's in central Washington. Huge Hispanic population. Huge Hispanic population. So I don't have an issue with the principal giving remarks in English and in Spanish. But this is America. And you should probably start in English. That's not a controversial thing. And it's kind of crazy that they didn't. But now, so they're trying to figure out, how do we hold this student accountable? Because he already graduated, they already gave him his diploma. So he's got to go this week. He's got to meet with school administrators, with his family. The Pasco School District said in a statement, "We're disappointed and saddened that a Pasco high school student chose to disrupt the graduation ceremony by making a personal statement that does not reflect the values of our school district. Before participating in graduation ceremonies, all students are required to sign an agreement to uphold standards of appropriate conduct. The student's decision to move into the personal space of the name reader and speak over their microphone was a clear departure from that agreement and selfishly took attention away from the achievements of all graduates being celebrated. The district will take steps to prevent disruption of speakers on stage at all future events." An administrator reportedly addressed the disruption on stage and on stage and after the ceremony. The district plans to hold a series of meetings and listening sessions this week with students, staff, and families who were impacted. While district and school admin plan to meet with the student and his family, it's unclear if he will face any discipline or repercussions. So let's try to wrap our mind around that for a second. They're going to hold listening sessions and meetings with students, staff, and families who were impacted. Something tells me there's also going to be some student, staff, and families who show up and agree with this kid that, why did you start in Spanish and not English? It's just a very weird, do both, but start with English. It's also interesting that the excuse they're giving for him violating sort of the code of conduct isn't what he said, but that he moved into the personal space of the person reading the names and used the microphone. So maybe part of them understands that he probably has a point, and that's probably why they scrubbed the video online. And they're just saying basically he got in the name reader's personal space, and that's problematic. But again, he already has his diploma, so I'm not really sure what they're going to do to him. But he shouldn't have done it. There's so many of these videos that go around of parents acting like complete fools when their kids' names are called at graduation and drowning out the kid after it. And it's can we just act like adults at graduation ceremonies? And for these kids, you're going into adulthood, so maybe you should act like adults too, although he is correct. So here's the other reason I wanted to talk about that today. The media is all over it. Seattle Times, this kid's name's everywhere. That video's everywhere. Oh my God, he said they should have spoke English. This kid is a hateful, bigot, horrible human being. Meanwhile, a protest at a graduation ceremony at the University of Washington has gotten virtually no attention. In fact, are we the first ones to report on this? It was a tip that came into us. We haven't seen anything, so you might be hearing about it first here on Undivided. So let me show you a picture that was sent to us by a viewer. So this is at the UW School of Law graduation on Monday. So a woman came up, and you kind of see her off to the right, lower area, and stood there with a sign for 10 minutes that read, "You can't be pro-Palestine without being pro-armed resistance." And they let this person who's clearly advocating violence against Jewish people stand there for 10 minutes, and nobody said or did anything to remove her. 10 minutes. So you've got these graduates at UW Law School who have to get their diploma and march past this sign advocating violence against Jewish people, advocating armed resistance. We've reached out to UW to ask, why did you let that person stand on stage uninterrupted for 10 minutes? As our tipster is telling us, they haven't gotten back to us yet. You think that story is all over the news? You think UW is going to try to go after this person for advocating harm against Jewish people during a graduation ceremony? Think the Seattle Times is going to do some big expose on it? Of course not, because when you're a left-wing lunatic and you do virtually anything, nothing is going to happen to you. If you're a high school kid who graduates, and mind you, a high schooler versus college, if anything, there should be higher standards for how college students conduct themselves. High schooler who shouts, oh, should have started in English. Now his name's plastered everywhere, the news media, wall to wall. He's got to meet them at school with his parents. There's listening sessions and all of this stuff. Listening sessions because he made a valid point about you starting in Spanish. Is the UW going to hold listening sessions about the protester they allowed to be on stage for 10 minutes with a sign advocating violence against Jewish people? Something tells me probably not. So it just shows you. Hypocrisy, double standard. If you're on the left, you can do virtually anything and get away with it in the state of Washington and the state of California and the state of Oregon. And I'm sure some other states as well. All right, let's get to a double dose of unbelievable, shall we? Boop. Part of me wants to update that graphic because it was something I made like by myself when I was doing the show to the spare bedroom of my house with rudimentary knowledge of how to use and edit anything. And it's so corny and tacky, but I kind of love it still. I don't think I'm going to change it.
Yeah, no, I like it.
I could make such a better graphic now, but now I'm like, nope. I like it.
People would miss the boop.
People would. Yeah, I already changed it once. It used to be something else, and people lost their minds, and now they're used to the spaceship. Anyway, so the Seattle Pride is, the Seattle Times, although it should just be called the Seattle Pride newspaper. So they are shaming corporations publicly for not supporting this year's Seattle Pride festivities. So a reminder, back in April, the Seattle Times ran this headline. Amid DEI rollback, Seattle Pride events see corporate sponsors pull back. And the whole gist of this article, we did a big segment on it at the time, was the Seattle Times was basically suggesting, and they were taking Seattle Pride's word for it. They were suggesting that Seattle Pride was short $300,000 in corporate donations because Donald Trump and people hate the gays. So the Seattle Times just again took Seattle Pride's word for it and basically said, oh my God, all these corporations, because of Donald Trump and all this stuff, they don't want to sponsor Seattle Pride anymore. And what we talked about at the time is the Seattle Times made no mention of the fact that 3 years ago, Seattle Pride came out and publicly shamed its corporate sponsors, chiefly Amazon. Amazon had gone to them. They wanted to be the presenting sponsor. They were going to give Seattle Pride $100,000. And Seattle Pride went out publicly and said, basically, we're not taking their evil money because they've made a couple donations to Republican political candidates. So after that happened, people stopped, these big corporations, including Amazon, stopped sponsoring Seattle Pride. It's like, we came to you with $100,000 and then you shamed us on the news for good headlines. So the Seattle Times back in April mentioned nothing about that. It was just like, you're all bigots and these corporations are all bigots and they don't want to support Seattle Pride because Donald Trump. When there was plenty of evidence as to why Seattle Pride has lost corporate sponsors. It's because they're a bunch of jerks. So now the Seattle Times is out with a news story, this one even worse, because they're publicly naming and shaming via Seattle Pride, getting the names from Seattle Pride, putting them in their newspaper, saying these are the companies that sponsored Seattle Pride previously and aren't sponsoring them anymore. And if you just read the headline and the first paragraph, which Washington companies are not returning as Seattle Pride Parade sponsors? It says several Seattle area companies and organizations are not returning as sponsors of the Seattle Pride Parade, including Boeing, the Expedia Group, and Amazon's LGBTQ+ employee resource group. So you have to get several paragraphs into it to know kind of what's going on here. But if you just read this, which most people are just going to read headlines and maybe glance the first few sentences, they're going to be like, okay, Boeing, Expedia, Amazon hate gay people. And that's what Seattle Times wants to accomplish here. They want to accomplish that. They want, and they're anti-big business and anti all these corporations, they want people to believe that these corporations hate gay people and that they're hateful bigots, and that's why they've pulled their money from Seattle Pride. But much like the first story the Seattle Times put out about this, they completely lack context and bury key details that explain away some of this as really no big deal and nothing related to them hating gay people or being scared of retribution from Donald Trump. So if you keep reading the story like way down, you'll get some more details. It says, in a statement, an Expedia Group spokesperson said the company has proudly supported Seattle Pride for many years and did request to renew its sponsorship of the parade this year, but were denied by organizers. They said our commitment to LGBTQIA plus community issues remains unwavering. So Expedia says, what are you talking about? We wanted to sponsor them and they denied it. And Seattle Pride basically says, oh, that was a misunderstanding. But still, they're still listed in the first sentence of the Seattle Times article as a company that's no longer supporting Pride. And then you've got to read halfway down to find out that they wanted to support it. And the Pride organizers didn't accept their money. So you're shaming them for literally no reason. And then you get into the Amazon thing. So Glamazon is Amazon's LGBTQ plus employee resource group. It says it's also not renewing its sponsorship of Seattle Pride Parade, though it is supporting other Pride events in the region, including festivities in Bellevue and Burien. Okay, so you've got this article again, which in its very first sentence wants to vilify Amazon. That's the suggestion they're giving to readers, that Amazon hates gay people. And then you have to read down to find out that this group is still supporting many Pride festivities in the region. They're just not supporting Seattle Pride. And why is it? Well, because Seattle Pride cut ties with Amazon as a corporate sponsor in 2022, citing the company's financial contributions to lawmakers and legislation that backed anti-LGBTQ agendas. They said the company's, the Seattle Times, the company's affinity group, however, could still participate as a sponsor. But they don't want to because you vilified their parent company. So they're taking their money and they're supporting Pride organizations elsewhere, and they still very much support Pride, just not Seattle Pride. Because Seattle Pride threw them under a bus a couple years ago. And then at the very end, just like their article back in April, what does the Seattle Times say? The Seattle Times is a corporate sponsor of Pride this year. So you've got the Seattle Times, a corporate sponsor of Pride, working with Seattle Pride to publish now in the course of a few months two really, I would call them defamatory statements about these companies, lacking any context whatsoever about they're basically throwing just baseless claims out there. They want their readers to believe that these major corporations hate gay people, when there's actually some legitimate reasons that they're not sponsoring Pride again this year. In the case of Expedia, we wanted to. They rejected our money. In the case of Amazon, well, they kind of publicly shamed us a few years ago, so we're going to spend our money on Pride stuff elsewhere. Unbelievable. The Seattle Times, hopeless, utterly hopeless. Okay, coming up next, I want to talk about this lawsuit that has now been filed. It's insane. Serious accusations against the superintendent of public instruction, Kruse Reichdahl. He's being accused of retaliating against an OSPI employee who spoke out in support of protecting girls' sports. That employee is now suing the state and Kruse Reichdahl. We'll have the details coming up. First, everybody has a plan for retirement, I would say. Even if, like me, you're fairly young and you've got a ton of years left for retirement, Mike and I still have our vision. We still have our goal. We've planned it out. We know what we want to do. And I think we'd be devastated if the day came and we hadn't saved enough money to make our retirement dreams possible. And so one of the things I think for all of us that's a good thing to do, especially in these moments of kind of economic up and downs and turmoil and stocks, is to make sure that our hard-earned retirement is properly protected against risk. Look, risk is part of the game. Obviously, it's always going to be associated with investments. But Zach Abraham and his team at Know Your Risk Radio and Bulwark Capital, they specialize in managing risk. This is what they do. And so Zach and his team can do a free portfolio review where they're going to go over your investments. Zach's going to give you his honest opinion. He might think that your allocations are great and not recommend any changes, or he might say, hey, we need to totally rework this if you're going to reach your retirement goals. And they'll also do a full reveal of how Bulwark is always looking for opportunities to lower risk, lower cost, and give your retirement as much upside as possible. We only get one retirement. There is no harm in getting a second opinion. So schedule your free Know Your Risk portfolio review now at knowyourriskpodcast.com. That's knowyourriskpodcast.com. Okay, so we have heard rumblings of this behind the scenes for a couple months, but the woman who filed this lawsuit wasn't quite ready to come on the show. We don't know if she's ready to come on the show or wants to yet, but we've known this is happening behind the scenes, and we were just sort of waiting for the hammer to fall on Kruse Reichdahl and for a lawsuit to be filed, which it has now. So our friend Alicia Perkins at OSD Rescue is the first one to publish this. We've been communicating with her quite a bit behind the scenes. Her headline, "Fired for Defending Female Sports, Lawsuit Accuses Reichdahl of Retaliation." Now, it has to do with a now fired OSPI worker named Darby Kokkonen. So she worked for OSPI and also at the same time was serving on the Tumwater, and is still correct, serving on the Tumwater School Board. So here from OST Rescue, State Superintendent Kruse Reichdahl, as well as the Office of Superintendent of Public Instruction and the State of Washington, are all named as defendants in a lawsuit filed by Darby Kokkonen on June 3rd, 2025. The lawsuit alleges that Kokkonen was the victim of retaliatory termination from her job at OSPI as Director of Student Information. Kokkonen, who is also currently serving as an elected Tumwater School Board Director, says she was fired for speaking out on transgender athletes competing in female sports during a February 27th school board meeting. So the context and history here is important, and it stems actually a lot of it from stuff that was covered on this show. So you'll probably remember Frances Stout. So we had Frances Stout on the show. She is just graduating as a junior at Tumwater High School. She sat out, as you'll recall, her final basketball game of the year because there was a biological boy on the opposing team. And she had long ago promised herself that she would not play against a boy. So she did that. She came on this show, and then her story went crazy. She was doing national news. We had the transgender athlete on our show, who was perfectly lovely, by the way. I just happened to disagree with his decision to play against girls. So this became quite the story nationally for a few months. So in response to Frances's bravery, the Tumwater School Board took a symbolic vote. And they basically said, it was a split vote, but the no men and women's sports side had it. And they took a symbolic vote to say, we don't support men competing against women. And one of the school board directors who voted in favor of protecting girls' sports is this Darby Kokkonen. So that happens on February 27th. Now, you'll remember on March 4th, in response to that symbolic vote, because individual school districts can't just ban boys from girls' sports, so it was symbolic. In response to that, a few days later, what did Kruse Reichdahl do? Well, he sent the Tumwater School Board a threatening letter. And he basically told them, you can't do this, this is discriminatory. And he was sending these threatening letters left and right to any school districts or school boards who dared push back against radical gender ideology. So, of course, one of the people who his threatening letter was directed at was Darby Kokkonen. So what we didn't realize as all this was happening was Darby was also employed at OSPI. Her full-time job was working for Kruse Reichdahl as the Director of Student Information at OSPI. So a few days go by. She ends up getting terminated from her OSPI job. She told us, well, she says in the lawsuit and through Alicia Perkins, she had no disciplinary record at OSPI, had always only received favorable reviews for her performance. She said in the lawsuit on March 6th, 2025, less than 10 days after the vote, and just 2 days after that threatening letter to the Tumwater School Board from Kruse Reichdahl, Darby was placed on administrative leave by OSPI. No specific reason, policy, conduct, or performance issue was identified as a basis for the action. Substantial restrictions were placed on her activities, including removing her work equipment and network access, prohibiting her from coming onto OSPI's Capitol building grounds or contacting any OSPI employee during normal work hours. She received no contact from OSPI regarding the administrative leave until March 19th, when she was informed in a phone call with the Human Resources Department and the OSPI Chief of Staff that her employment was ending, effective immediately. Once again, she says in the lawsuit, no reason was provided regarding the termination of her employment during the call or in her termination letter. The lawsuit reads, the plaintiff believes and alleges that the decision to place her on leave and subsequently terminate her was motivated by her exercise of First Amendment rights during the public school board meeting. So that's her version of events. She says, was only ever a stellar employee, no negative reviews, no disciplinary record. You look at the timeline of it. February 27th, as a school board member, she takes the vote, symbolic to say no boys and girls sports. A few days later, Kruse Reichdahl sends the school board, her boss, in her official capacity at OSPI, sends her, in her capacity as a school board member, a letter basically threatening them. 2 days after that, she's placed on administrative leave. No reason given. And to make it even worse, this is just a note from OSD Rescue's reporting. Her termination came at a time when her spouse, an Army reservist, was scheduled to deploy to the Middle East. And OSPI was fully aware of her husband's upcoming deployment and the resulting hardship her termination would cause. Now, look, if you have cause to fire someone, that's a sad story, but it's not necessarily a reason not to fire them. But to the best of her knowledge, she has not been given a reason for her termination. And given the timeline, I think it's reasonable to believe that she was terminated because Kruse Reichdahl and OSPI did not like the fact that she does not believe boys should compete against girls. Adding another kind of personal wrinkle to all this, did you know that that's Kruse Reichdahl's school district, essentially? Like, he has personal ties to the Tumwater School District. So he has a reason to have personal animus over this school board member who's also an employee of his, speaking up to protect girls, a position that he refuses to take. So unless OSPI has some major revelation of misconduct perpetrated by this employee, I don't see any reason why this wouldn't result in a huge payday, which she would deserve. Again, it would be paid by the taxpayers of the state of Washington. But I think this shows the fear for anyone who's in a position to speak out against radical gender ideology. Kruse Reichdahl will send you threatening letters. He did it to multiple school districts across the state. He'll threaten to pull funding from school districts. He's already done that. And if he has any power and control over your job, he'll take it away from you. This is a major controversy. You think the mainstream news will report on it? Guess we'll have to wait and find out. But big credit to Alicia Perkins at OSD Rescue for breaking that story. We're going to follow this. I hope at some point this employee is willing to come on and talk to us. And OSPI will never talk to us about personnel matters, although we'll do our best to try to get information from them on whether they have anything that they could offer us that would justify what they did to this worker. All right, I want to also take this opportunity, since we're talking about education and Kruse Reichdahl. We didn't play it on the show last week because we had a short week, but we had a fantastic guest on Sundays with Subscribers, expert in education, who was talking about Kruse Reichdahl and his assertion in a TVW interview that this whole radical gender ideology, boys and girls sports, boys and girls spaces thing is completely manufactured. Completely manufactured. He said that, we talked about on the show last week in a TVW interview, and we had a guest on Sundays with Subscribers. Carrie was an awesome guest, who was talking about, just how absurd this notion is that these sorts of radical gender ideology things are not impacting our schools and aren't happening at all. Here's a clip from Sundays with Subscribers.
It is happening. There is biological males across our country on public school campuses, including in Washington State, that are using the girls' locker room. And it is an attack on the safety, the privacy of these girls. And then on the sports teams, it's an issue of fairness and, again, safety. And so his notion is, and his talking points throughout that interview is, Civil rights, it's a civil rights issue. DEI, it's a civil rights issue. Well, think about civil rights. We have to protect these girls from an attack of biological males. And you can see across our country, under the guise of saying that I am transgender, there has been rapes that have happened on school campuses. These girls are not safe when biological males are entering their sports, entering their locker rooms. And for him to say it's not happening, that is so far-fetched. Just the sentence before what he said is, that there's such a population of intersex. And so it's not just as simple as male and female. And so his talking points, his notion, like they are not backed by science. Intersex is like 0.0001% or less of the population. And those are not the instances where this is happening. He also tried to push off as far as the sports, that it was the athletic association. It's really not in his control, and it's been happening for 15 years. And so, there's nothing he can do, and there's no problem here. But it is truly just not factual, and it's a lack of leadership. He's a father of a daughter, and you would think that he would want to protect his own daughter. But again, it's just these radical ideologies. It's who gets him elected, and he's after nothing that has to do with taking care of children, providing a high quality education, but just radical ideologies.
Yeah, that's our conversation with Dr. Carrie Ingraham, who's a senior fellow at Discovery Institute and director of the Institute's American Center for Transforming Education. She was a fantastic Sundays with Subscribers guest a couple weeks ago. If you want to check that full interview out by becoming a subscriber. And it's an interesting point she makes about so he wants to deny that these things are happening. But then when you have a school board that takes a symbolic vote to say, okay, we don't want these things to happen, he threatens them. Okay, if they're not happening, why do you care if they take a symbolic vote? He knows that they're happening. I mean, he's gone above and beyond to try to protect the right of boys to compete against girls, boys to be in girls' locker rooms. And he has the nerve to go and do a news interview where he knows he's not going to be called out on TVW and say, oh, that's just a manufactured crisis by the Trump administration. Okay, if it's a manufactured issue, why are you so obsessed with it? Why are you so obsessed with pushing it on schools and punishing schools and employees who don't align with it? Makes no sense in the world. Chris Reichdahl is a joke. Absolute clown. All right, coming up next, I'm pissed off at you guys. Yeah, I'm not happy, okay? You know why? I work hard on these polls. I work hard on these subscriber polls every day. I rack my brain. I'm like, I need a really compelling subscriber poll. And one time, a subscriber gives me a poll idea, and I use it, which was our poll idea today. And now people are in the comments saying, Brandi, this is the best poll you've ever done. And it's the one I didn't come up with. My feelings are really hurt, okay? No. We'll get to that coming up next. First, we had Todd Myers on today. We were doing a Zoom with Todd Myers, who we see often. I haven't seen him in maybe a month. You know what the first thing he said to me was? Brandi, you look like you've lost more weight. I was like, I have. Thank you, Todd. It's the Eastside Weight Loss Clinic program. It continues to just pay dividends for me. I started the program 2.5 years ago, lost an initial 30 pounds, went on to lose now 15 or 16 pounds more than that. And look, in 2.5 years, my weight still has gone up and down a little bit, but I use what I learned on the Eastside Weight Loss Clinic program to make sure it is never going to get out of control ever again. And some of the tools and tricks and portion control and ways to jumpstart your metabolism that I can continually go back to, and just, a healthier relationship with food, which is something I've been working on really my whole life. Is just having, I think it stems from, wow, I'm going to get deep here. I think it stems from food insecurity. I grew up, I had a lot of food insecurity. So if food was around, I just ate it because it was like, maybe I'll never have a chance to eat it again. God, maybe I should see a therapist. But, I've had great success on the Eastside Weight Loss Clinic program. And I think, it's not a magic trick, but definitely helped me recalibrate my relationship with food. And yes, Todd Myers, I have lost more weight recently. Thank you so much for noticing. Daryl told me the same thing when he came in yesterday. And he said, you look really skinny. And then I go to Nicole. Nicole hasn't even told me that. And Nicole denied that and said she had told me that. But I don't believe that because I don't remember it. Eastside Weight, she's over there smiling like she hates me. EastsideWeightLossClinic.com, EastsideWeightLossClinic.com. Schedule a free 15-minute consultation with Dr. Ryan Coogan and his team.
You shamed me for smiling during that yesterday, so I was trying not to smile.
And then no smiling over there. I'm doing my best. Okay. Our daily subscriber show poll, which comes to you via Weiss Castle, one of our wonderful subscribers on Locals, floated this idea for a subscriber poll yesterday, and I thought, that's a good one. And then you guys got on your little keyboards like little keyboard warriors and said, Brandi, this is the best poll you've ever done, not knowing that it wasn't even my idea. So I guess I just come up with shitty polls, whatever. No, I'm kidding. This is a good idea, though. If you have a good poll idea, hit me with it, because sometimes it's really hard to come up with a subscriber poll for the day. All right, the question is, if you suspected that a contractor working in your home was using illegal labor, would you report it? Would you report it? Wow. What a difficult question. Nicole, yay or nay, would you report it?
I probably would not report it. I would not stand in the way of ICE, obviously, of enforcement. And if there was someone I, had information that maybe committed a crime, a serious crime, then I would probably report that.
Yeah.
But not just that. I wouldn't make that assumption, because I don't know how you suspect that without making an assumption for a possibly racist reason, I guess.
Yeah. So
tough situation.
Right now, about 80% are saying no, they wouldn't. And we know that we're pro legal immigration, our viewers and listeners and all of that. About 30%, 27% saying yes, they would. I think a lot of people who answered no had the same sort of concern you did about, Greg said, how am I to know? If they're working and contributing to society, low priority, and who knows if they're working on legal standing through our system. I know they are criminal. If I know they're criminals here illegally engaging in illegal activities, yes. And I agree with that, but my answer to this would also be no. Like, what am I, just if a brown person shows up to my house, be like, ICE, come check? Yeah. No, that's ridiculous. And yeah, that's just absolutely absurd. So absolutely not. So if any contractors who work at my house hear this and think that I would call ICE on them, I most certainly would not. That doesn't mean that I don't support like broader workplace enforcement actions. I mean, we've done some on the show where they had evidence of widespread fraudulent documents, like 60 per, at one business. I think that's a different situation. Does that make me a hypocrite? I don't know, but what am I going to do? I'm not going to call ICE.
And like you said, like, that's their job. That's ICE's job to identify and enforce, and it's not mine.
Yeah, definitely not going to stand in the way, like these lunatics. And if I know of someone who committed a crime and I know they're in the country illegally, like I would
report
something.
The crime. Like, it just doesn't matter whether they're here illegally or not.
Oh, it does to me. So, it depends what the crime is.
Well, for sure, but I'm not going to report shoplifting chapstick of an illegal or a resident.
Oh, right. I'm not at Bartell Drugs being like, let me call police here, citizen cop.
Right. Didn't you steal chapstick? Wasn't that
No, it was blue eyeshadow.
Oh, okay.
Because we say on this show, I have no secrets. If I ever run for office, you literally know everything I've ever done. When I was in the 6th grade, I stole blue eyeshadow from a Target in Moorhead, Minnesota, and I got caught. And I cried a lot, but it didn't get me out of it, okay? So, not the first time either. First time I'd gotten caught. My friends and I used to go to this gas station when we were like in grade school, and we'd steal those little Debbie treats. That's why I got so fat as a kid, apparently. Anyway, there's a lot more where that came from. The time I got in trouble for drinking underage while I was in college and I was dressed as a Hooters waitress. God, I'm glad that was before the time of body-worn video cameras. Shirley Lopez, although, I look good in that costume. Shirley Lopez, if he has a business license and is bonded, then the state should know if someone is illegal. If a contractor is hiring illegal workers, that might be another thing, but then how would I know? Y says, probably not, unless I suspect them that those workers are being abused or something super shady is going on, like a human trafficking sort of situation. Right. Yeah. Pat says, if they are illegal, they cannot legally work in the U.S. They cannot pay taxes or pay into Social Security, employment, etc. Let's see here. Dan over on Locals needs to be systemic government action to fix the situation, not individuals taking the risk to tattle on small businesses. Todd Welch, I'm less concerned about working illegal immigrants. The primary focus should be on those who are committing crimes in the U.S. If you are here, follow our laws, and are working hard, then we need to find a way to facilitate a legal status of some type, get programs for learning English and other ideas that will benefit the U.S. and those immigrating here. There was this interesting response on X. Hold on, I have to pull it back up from an X subscriber. Give me a second, because I had to read it to Nicole as soon as it came in. I'm like, hold on. Yes, fugitive mama on X. I suspect my substitute housekeeper might be illegal, and I'm trying to decide how to handle it. Well, good luck. I don't know what to tell you there.
I would just probably move on with your life. Unless, again, if it's a trafficking situation or something like that. But if it's just somebody trying to support their family, I don't know.
Dan says...
It's a tough situation because Biden let them in. He opened the borders.
Right.
Yeah, it's illegal, but he didn't really discourage it.
Right.
It's just like when your mom's like, yeah, take that blue eyeshadow.
My mom didn't say that. I got in a lot of trouble with my mother.
But let's say she did. Does that give you permission? No. But
No, sure
does
doesn't.
it make it as some fault fall on your mom? Yeah.
Sure. Can Deegan, this is the greatest poll question of 2025. Screw you, Can. I'm just kidding. No, it is. We appreciate Weiss Castle's great recommendation. And finally, Rosie the Frenchie says individual residents aren't capable of determining the citizenship of workers. And to that, I agree. Unless you overhear him saying, I'm in the country illegally. Actually, I was at an event the other day speaking, and somebody came up to me afterwards, and I had talked a little bit about immigration and deportation. And he said, hey, my friend is in the country illegally. What do you think? What would you do? And I'm like, if I were him, I'd self-deport. I'd take advantage of their opportunity to self-deport, and then I'd try to come back through a legal path. So that's my advice. All right. We'll get to our closing sanity check and comments. Am I missing something? I feel like I'm missing something. Maybe not. All right. Comments from the show. Culper just signed up as a member. Keep up the great work, Brandi, Nicole, and team. Thank you. Yeah, we are probably by the end of the show, maybe just 50 paid subscribers away from reaching our goal, and we have 3 days to do it. So if you've been just holding out, less than $5 a month when you use that 30% off promo. Leah with a super chat. This feels close to Civil War talk. States fighting with the federal government. Thoughts? Yeah, I hate when people talk about or suggest. Somebody said if Trump arrests Gavin Newsom, we're going to be in a civil war. I don't think that would be the thing that starts it, because nobody cares that much about Gavin Newsom, so I don't think they'd fight that hard for him. But yeah, feds versus the states, and we're more divided than ever. What I don't want to see is people on the right come out and respond to violence with violence, because we already know then the media will make it entirely about anything anyone on the right does. So I don't want to see that. But I also don't know when the media is going to start calling out the left for its widespread political violence over many years. Eric Cooper, as a combat vet, I'll say this is not the country I served anymore. I hate hearing that, but I get it. Stephanie, Nick Brown is trying to stir the pot and justify riots. Who the hell knows what Nick Brown is trying to do? Does Nick Brown even know what Nick Brown's trying to do?
All he wants to do is slam Trump in public. That's all
oh my God.
He wants to do.
He is way more unhinged, TDS, than even Bob Ferguson.
Well, I don't know. They're pretty similar. I think he just took the reins from him, right?
He was just like, I'm going to do exactly what Bob Ferguson did to get elected governor, so I can get elected governor too, which I guess isn't a bad strategy. It worked for Bob. Matt Gilbert, it's funny how we are so fascist that people are able to speak out about the fascist government after being oppressed. Yeah. Yeah, it's true. Chip Scott, never thought I'd agree with Fetterman, but he has become the most stable, reasonable aspect of the Democratic Party. Who would have ever believed that?
Figure.
Not us. Not us. I'm kind of glad Democrats forced him to stay in the race despite his clear shortcomings, because that turned out really well. Sam McDaniel, the Dems thought that when Fetterman had his stroke, he would be easy to control. No need to replace him, they thought. I think that stroke straightened him out. But they definitely did he can just be another shell for us, just another warm body. Now he's not a warm body. He's technically a warm body, but, not for them. I think he's a great example for people about putting partisan politics aside. And, when you have anyone who's incapable of calling out a specific political party or a specific leader and agrees with them 100% of the time, I just don't trust them. Same with Trump stuff. We find stuff to criticize Trump about all the time. I just have a lighter tone about it because now I think he's funny. Let me see. Tia, please act a fool, Seattle, and give Trump a reason to come take over. I don't want to see any of that because I'm going to be in the middle of it. Raven's Throne, $5 super chat, just for nothing. Thank you. Mike, No Kings, the movement that's going to be happening on Saturday, is funded by the heiress of Walmart. Note Trump recently called out Walmart about raising prices and tariffs. So yeah, one of the heirs the heirs of the Walmart fortune took out all these full-page ads in newspapers across the country promoting the No Kings events, which is quite interesting because you think Democrats are going to be better for your business.
There's a boycott, like a MAGA boycott of Walmart now.
Oh man, that's your key. That's your base,
right?
That's your base. I love a good Walmart. They don't really have them in the Seattle area, so whenever I see one, I'm like, I gotta go to Walmart. Walk around. It's just my roots.
It's cheap.
It is cheap. They got tons of stuff in there. Papa Woody, sounds like we're already run by a fascist regime in Washington. I agree. Leah, I already read that one. Robin, UW, shame on you. Go Cougs. Yeah, that is something UW would do. Not the Cougs, at least.
Not the Cougs.
I don't think so. All right, good comments, everyone.
Yeah,
Nicole,
stuff.
we have a sanity check, right?
We got it.
Great, love it. So I've been taught, well, let's get to our closing sanity check. I always forget. You know, that's another one I could redo. Another graphic, but why redo perfection? Really,
Right.
It just looks great.
Works.
All right. So as all of this chaos for a fourth day is unfolding in California, I mean, last night it got even more violent, fires, confrontations, all of this stuff. Maxine Waters still wants us not to believe what we see with our own eyes.
And even those who were out of step with what we are advocating, peaceful protest, did not create any violence. Nobody was shot. Nobody was killed. Get it in your head. And so when martial law is called, what are you going to say? I missed the point. Don't miss the point, you all. Don't think that somehow, because they called out the National Guard, there was violence. There was no violence. I was on the street. I know. And I went from downtown detention back out into the community, talking to people what happened in Paramount, what happened in Compton, what happened in Inglewood. So, first of all, get it straight. And don't just rely on what you're being told or the few incidents that you saw.
Literally don't believe what you see with your own eyes. Believe me. Got it. That has been our closing sanity check. That has been today's episode of Undivided. Quick plug again for our promo. In 3 days, we'll shut up about it, but we hardly ever try to coerce you into becoming paid subscribers. So we've been running this promo, trying to add 300 new paid subscribers in 30 days. We are this close. We have about 50 left as of right now. You can use the do you have the promo? Thanks. You can use the promo code 300, number 300 at patreon.com/undivided. If you just go to undividedpod.com, you can do it that way too and click on support the show. Help us reach our goal. I don't like setting a goal and not reaching it, okay? But we're close. And thank you so much to everyone who has helped in that effort and who has signed up to support the show. Thank you, Nicole. And with that, that has been today's episode of Undivided. We appreciate all of you. Thank you for being here. Thank you for your commitment to giving common sense a comeback. We will be monitoring, maybe even covering in person, the events that unfold tomorrow evening in Nicole's Lake. What? You don't have to go if you don't want to.
Okay, I might not tomorrow. Okay. I have plans.
Okay, yeah. I say that. Nicole's over there like, oh.
I'm watching this ant crawl all over my computer right now. I don't have anything to kill it with. It's just an ant.
If it's just
not
an
a
ant,
spider.
just crush it.
No, I'm not crushing it on my computer.
You're one of those?
No, it's not a spider.
No, you're one of those.
Oh, I'm one of those, yeah.
That's ridiculous. One of those carry spiders outside people. Give me a break. Anyway, a lot going on. Be safe out there, people. Be safe out there. Spread the good news. Spread the common sense. Let's fix things. Anything else? I don't think so. See you tomorrow, same time, right here.